I've been diving headfirst into VR now for a decent amount of time, so it's safe to say that I'm a qualified level 60 Gold Platinum VR Game Master with a very sizable game catalogue to my name. Getting used to VR has been a journey unto itself. It took me months to start accepting that I have a full body to use and assist me with my movements in general. For too long did I only attempt to use my upper body while leaving my waist and legs still during most interactions, as VR typically only represents your upper body in-game. It took me a few months to begin to feel comfortable with shooting and start to take advantage of my natural aim. It's taken me all the way until very recently to start moving and using my legs in melee games to assist with my swings, whereas before I would awkwardly stand in place and swing my weapon and upper torso and wonder why I felt like a plank of wood each time I attacked. I wouldn't change these things for the world now that I've adapted, and it's significantly more engaging than 2D interactions. But with this familiarity, it's become more and more obvious that present PC VR gaming has a number of issues which continue to leave the potential of the medium in stasis. I want to bring to attention some of these issues, express why I believe they exist, and give suggestions on what can be done to move past them. A VR landscape that can begin showing off its true potential will be a benefit to everyone. So after going through a few of the popular games, and then moving on to the lesser-known titles, an issue many new adopters of VR will soon notice are so many games which turn out to be short, self-contained experiences in a small set of levels or sandboxes, and at their worst are glorified tech demos masquerading as games. These are seldom innovative or unique experiences either, but instead only ask of us the same old tired things we've been doing in 2D for forever now, just in 3D instead. And maybe, just maybe, if we're lucky, there might be some element of the interaction which uniquely takes advantage of VR, like having a dynamic inventory, or very basic gestures with a tiny bit of physics thrown in, but otherwise, we're mostly just using our whole body like a mouse to point and click with our controller in one way or the other. Doing these things in 3D can already be more interesting compared to 2D, especially when first getting into VR, but we get used to the 3D element eventually. At some point, you are then left wondering why we bother to engage in an elaborate setup that comes with notable compromises, like lower resolutions, less graphical detail, and the need for a very decent PC to run it, but then most of the time only being asked to interact with short, shallow experiences in a manner like we're using a mouse and keyboard. It's a pitiful, sad waste of the medium. There are, of course, genuinely good experiences that aim to take better advantage of VR, which are drip-fed into the marketplace, but they're relatively few at present, and they're hard to discover in an environment awash with safe mediocrity and badly programmed amateur jank. At the very least, I will try to do my part with this channel to gradually bring attention to those gems that I find, and, of course, to show off my elite VR skills. It would appear that many active developers in the VR industry are incapable of being mechanically creative with the medium, or they're too fearful to try new things, or maybe they're just lazy and unconcerned. Or perhaps they are rendered incapable by today's train wreck of interconnected software, or all of the above. I know that I sound harsh in this observation, but I don't care. As a user, I can only make my observations from the results I've seen. I also feel that in the sphere of public discussion in the industry, we are long overdue for a more critical lens being placed on both developer and player attitudes, whose minimum quality standards for an acceptable product seems to be sinking lower and lower with every passing moment. These are players and developers who are always equipped with excuse after excuse for this low-quality degradation just because they get their jollies from creating and feeling a part of some kind of masturbatory community. I want to see the medium and art form of gaming be treated with the respect it deserves by those involved, and that means being constructively critical and holding each other to account, just as much as we would also be supportive and patient. But getting back to the main point, Creativity in input mechanics for VR seems to be mostly ignored by developers. Time and time again, we keep seeing point-and-click traditional 2D-based abstractions still being used for too many parts of VR gameplay. It blows my mind because, to me at least, the possibilities of now having an environment with full 3D scale and depth and 6 degrees of input freedom creates so many obvious possibilities. Why are we still so rarely creating UI interactions that fully take advantage of our free body movement, for example? As a really basic idea, we could hold a button and gesture in the air like you're opening a parchment to make a hologram appear projected from a thematically appropriate object in-game. Or we could use a physical object acting as an immersive menu, like a notebook or a tablet or some kind of funky gadget with a screen and buttons and dials like the Pip-Boy from Fallout. With my notebook example, a pencil could appear in the other hand for the player so they can write on it dynamically to interact with it. They can circle options or actually tick the tick boxes. And if for whatever reason it must be a traditional UI screen, then why not make it with buttons or dials and sliders on that screen so we can use our arms and grab and rearrange those things in a natural way, using the fine muscle movements of our entire arms, rather than a generic, shaky, unfiltered laser that points from our controller onto the screen, which is functional but boring and is devoid of imagination where so much more is possible. And if, as a developer, you're concerned about how to make object interactivity consistently work in every environment in your game, well, get creative to solve the problem, rather than keep looking at what already has been done for 2D. Here's another free and obvious idea for you. To solve that problem, have the player put on a visor or special pair of glasses on their in-game character, which transports their view to another area with all of these objects consistently in place and will not interfere with their other environment. Like a VR inside VR situation. Not only would this solve the problem, but it's just a cool, immersive, and unique thing to do in general for programmer and player. But why would you want to make the effort, though? Why not just do something dull but functional to get by and get your game made and shipped? Because, as developers, you're also engineers and artists. Isn't it the whole point of your craft to create interesting and new things and see how they work? Is that not one of the main attractions and motivations for enhancing your skill set so you can explore and implement new, cool, fun ideas, which can lead to breakthroughs and innovation, rather than just rehashing the bare minimum of what works? If your motivations as a developer consist of just wanting to get things out of the way and done most of the time, rather than be enthusiastic and interested in the journey and possibilities for what you make, then it might be worth questioning if this job is really something you want to do. Or it might be worth questioning whether the tools you're using are piling on too much complexity and arbitrary steps where there needn't be. And perhaps, just perhaps, you might start demanding or building better, simpler software, rather than just always accepting the unsuitable status quo. A lot of the time, doing these things and taking those steps isn't that difficult. It just needs the will. Oh, and why are we still relying near exclusively on hugely limited thumbsticks and touchpads for moving, when we've had the possibility for revolutionary precise arm swinger movement since at least 2016? Why have we not been exploring that more? I just don't understand. My concluding advice on this area is for developers to start focusing more attention on the input possibilities for VR. The input is where the interesting creative innovations mostly lie. We have 6 degrees of freedom now, a full sense of 3D size and depth, and we have precise, nuanced, analog control in a 3D space offered by the fine, natural motor movements of our bodies. We are pretty much in the worlds with our bodies now. We can return to the idea of how we'd interact in real life with these things, rather than abstracting to the limits of keyboard and mouse and controllers. Unstick your minds from 2D input and get your minds into 3D thinking. My next issue is twofold and somewhat contradictory. In one part, PCVR is being inundated by uninspired, jank, rubbish software made by young Timmy, who recently got their hands on a free commercial game engine, watched a few video tutorials, and has now decided that their generic shooter game with visuals from the early PlayStation 2 era, but with abysmal performance needing a computer several orders of magnitude more powerful just so it maybe runs smoothly, is exactly what we need more of in VR. Spoilers, we don't. In another part, there are more competent developers who go the opposite direction, focusing too much on trying to make their game look pretty, at the cost of making the barrier to entry even more restrictive and, consequently, not having enough resources to spare on making interesting interactions for the player, instead relying on spectacle alone, making for a short-lived, shallow, throwaway experience that, while good-looking in 3D, is still not compelling. Combine these two opposite extremes with a bland, mediocre middle ground of games with only a handful of genuine diamonds buried amongst them, and it makes for a bleak, demoralizing and saddening VR landscape, seeing such potential be squandered. I don't really know what to suggest about Timmy running rampant in the storefront at present, as general player and developer standards seem to be lowering further and further into the abyss, as I have already mentioned. What I can say is that if you spy a game on a storefront using that same generic Unity and Unreal font you'll quickly come to recognize, and with the same blocky, low-polygon art style that is becoming ubiquitous with Timmy and his creations, then with very few exceptions, just click ignore, do your part, and tell the algorithm that we don't accept this rubbish. Early access is a nice idea, but in my eyes is a complete failure in its current form and has been for years. The forgiving nature of early access is constantly abused by Timmy and other bad actors in the industry to excuse and sell complete rubbish that rarely gets finished, while simultaneously serving as a catch-all excuse by short-sighted, naive or conceited players as a defense for this poor behavior. But not because they genuinely care for the quality of the end product, no. It's merely an egoic, posturing display of trendy social virtue and empathy to prove to themselves and others that they exist. It's a parasitical relationship that often emerges between them and the developers, and an echo chamber community on anti-social media ensues, safeguarding this toxicity and further erodes the quality of the industry. This can be another topic entirely, though, which perhaps I'll cover in some form in another video. My suggestion is that somewhat modern graphical fidelity take a back seat in VR development for now, with focus instead being first and foremost on exploring interesting interactive possibilities and then building around that. As I said, I recognize I'm being a little contradictory here, having just criticized low-quality graphics. The performance cost of modern rendering for visuals is simply not worth the compromises we have to make at present. A strong, stable, consistent art style will always be more attractive to us. It will age much better, and with simpler rendering and lower performance costs, can make the barrier for entry much lower, allowing for more prospective players. No amount of post-processing, volumetric fog, tessellation, advanced ambient occlusion, and all of that stuff is going to make up for having uninspired, bland, generic, ill-fitting, and limited interactions in VR. We can be impressed by what we see, but we're engaged by what we can do. The last issue I want to talk about and notice from too many of these experiences and tech demos are developers clearly being scared to challenge players. In so many games, the fear and restraint to ask anything remotely challenging or different of a player oozes from every facet of the design choices. Players can't do this, players won't like that, players shouldn't move too fast, players shouldn't have to move their bodies if they don't want to, blah 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 blah. No. What you think is consideration and care is nothing but your fear disguising itself. How are we ever supposed to get used to and see the potential of these things if we're never given the chance to do so? How are we ever supposed to learn to ride a bike if we're not forced to do so without the training wheels? How are we ever supposed to learn to swim if we never take our armbands off? How are we ever supposed to overcome motion sickness if we don't force ourselves to endure and adapt without the aids blocking that chance? Since when, as living beings, did we lose the ability to adapt and excel and master new challenges we face to make us more able and competent? Never is the answer. We never lost that ability. So stop hamstringing your game design and babying players, anticipating that we are no longer able to face and adapt to anything even slightly uncomfortable or new. Does anything that is anything worthwhile or valuable to us in life ever come through safe comfort? No, it does not. We find the growth, ability, strength, and value when required and in many cases forced to face the discomfort of new challenges, of which when we emerge through, and we usually do, are always grateful and more competent for it. Our competency expands from this suffering. It does not contract. Developers, stop being scared to challenge players outside of their safe comfort zone, no matter how much they naively complain. Don't let their unconscious insecurities become your own and affect the potential of your game. VR players, ye who demand familiar comfort and safety to accommodate your self-serving neuroticism, get off your asses and face some genuine challenges rather than expect the world to shape itself around your fears. I say this not from a heartless, judgmental lack of concern or love for you. I say it because I know and believe that as an adaptable, living being of nature, you are strong, you are resilient, and you absolutely have the capability to face and overcome that which ails you, and can emerge all the freer and more competent for it. More comfort and safety will only make the monster grow bigger. I hope, in the moments that I may also fall down and struggle to get up, blindly cursing the world for my troubles, that you can remind me of this very same sentiment I passed on to you here. No doubt I will need it sometime too. As you might have guessed from this video or others I've made, I'm very passionate and excited about VR for the future of interactive mediums. And it saddens me greatly to see it mistreated and stagnate as I explore so many lackluster, barely finished titles that completely miss the point. I've no doubt many people who play VR and those who haven't played yet are still watching and waiting for the right people to come along and make that one amazing app which really excites them and shows off how revolutionary VR is and can be. But there is a chance we may never see that happen if we don't provoke onlookers in the industry to really start exploring and utilizing the innovative possibilities of VR input. How do we provoke that? By being the first ones to do exactly what we want to see happen. Drag our focus away from flat screen habits and explore what can be done in a whole new world. Inspire yourself to inspire others. We all stand on the shoulders of giants. No matter how obscure or small our actions may seem, we all have our parts to play. Virtual reality has given us wings. The sky has opened up for us to explore. Let's focus our attention on creating interactions that let us use those wings unimpeded and fly.